There was a man who rarely spoke to her, not out of rudeness nor arrogance, but because he was entirely immersed in his mission. He did not flood her with compliments. He did not chase. He did not flatter. And he did not submit. Yet she could not stop thinking about him. She watched him from across the room. His silence echoed louder than the laughter of every other man scrambling for her attention. This scene plays out every day, in bars, in gyms, in offices, and across digital spaces. The truth is, the man who appears to disregard her often becomes the one who occupies her thoughts most deeply. He is the one she replays in her mind, dissects with friends, and in the end, follows. Not because he demanded anything, but because his presence made demands on its own. This is the paradox of the feminine psyche. Attention is her oxygen, but restraint is her obsession. And the man who learns to master that balance becomes a sovereign force in her emotional world. At the core of this dynamic lies a timeless truth. Scarcity creates value. The man who is always available, emotionally exposed, and persistently seeking her approval becomes predictable. And what is predictable loses its power. But the man who holds back, not to manipulate, but because it is his nature, emits a far greater strength, control. Control over his impulses, control over his energy, control over his emotional responses. She cannot fully understand him, and that mystery forms a gravitational pull. Her mind begins to orbit his, like a satellite circling a planet. And within that orbit, surrender often follows, not because he asked for it, but because he no longer needs it. This is not about pretending to care less. It is about not needing her presence to define one's identity, authority, or worth. That kind of detachment has a magnetic force. Women feel it instantly. They call it confidence. They call it mystery. But in truth, it is self-possession, masculine restraint. This entire structure is supported by the nature of attention as psychological currency. Most women today are saturated with digital validation, likes, comments, messages, and symbols of desire. They become numb to it. But the man who resists the urge to join that noise, who does not seek approval, who offers nothing unnecessary, becomes a rare signal in a crowded world. He stands out, not by doing more, but by doing less with intention. This is why she listens to the man who rarely speaks, why she dresses differently if she believes he might be present, and why she follows the man who never even directly acknowledges her, because the hunger for his attention surpasses the comfort of staying in control. Psychologically, this operates under a principle known as intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful mechanisms in behavioral conditioning. When validation is offered randomly rather than consistently, the pursuit of it becomes addictive. The emotionally neutral man, not cold, simply unfazed, becomes a living trigger for this response. She doesn't know when or if she will receive his approval, and that uncertainty fuels her fixation. She begins adjusting her behavior in hopes of earning it. In contrast, the man who offers constant affirmation kills that tension, and with it, he loses emotional value. The truth is, women submit to what they cannot fully possess. And when a man lives from purpose, when his identity does not depend on her perception, he remains just beyond reach. This is masculine detachment in its purest form. The man who seems to ignore her isn't playing games. He is simply consumed by something larger than her. His absence is not a tactic. It is the natural result of focus. His emotional currency is not available for purchase. It is invested in legacy, craft, and vision. That, more than charm or attention, awakens something primal in her. Women may be drawn to affection, but they respect obsession, especially when that obsession is not aimed at them. She might be the center of attention for many men, but it is the man who refuses to place her at the center of his universe that she longs to impress. This reverses the dynamic. She becomes the one performing, seeking approval, stepping into the feminine role of pleasing rather than leading. And in that reversal, submission happens without being asked. To understand the depth of this, one must confront the reality of hypergamy, the instinctive drive in women to pursue the highest value man available. But high value is not merely defined by looks or wealth. It is established through psychological dominance. A man who remains emotionally unmoved in her presence sends a clear signal: I do not need you. That signal places him above her perceived value and activates a biological urgency in her to earn his attention, to be chosen by the one who chooses no one easily. The more she senses he could walk away at any moment, and would do so without hesitation, the more irreplaceable he becomes in her mind. This is why she yields, not because he shouted, not because he threatened, but because his silence carried more weight than the loudest voices in the room. She yields to the man who remains unmoved, who does not explain himself, who does not ask for permission. The man with calm eyes and an anchored posture reveals something essential. Her presence is not a necessity, it is a luxury. She does not submit to dominance. She submits to composure, because that composure leaves no room for chaos. And proximity to that still center of power becomes the only way for her to remain close. True power is not noisy. It does not demand attention. It does not raise its voice. It is quiet. It radiates from the man who does not flinch, who does not chase, and who does not react. He does not try to take over the room. He lets the room tune itself to his frequency. That is the man she follows, not because he compels her, but because he does not need her. There is something primitive in his indifference, something older than culture. A man who governs himself naturally earns the respect of others. And a woman, no matter how modern her ideas may be, still feels the ancestral pull toward a man whose stillness is stronger than another man's obsession. This is the paradox she cannot articulate. The more he restrains, the more she surrenders, not out of resentment, but from reverence. This is what we call erotic distance, the space between masculine presence and the feminine need to feel it. That space creates tension, and in that tension, her femininity deepens. She becomes more expressive, more nurturing, more yielding. Why? Because the man who seems to overlook her, not cruelly, but clearly, does not push her away. He draws her in precisely by refusing to enter her emotional battlefield. He is not there to compete in chaos. He stands still while she spins. And the more he holds that center, the more she is pulled toward it. This is polarity. Feminine energy moves, emotes, flows. Masculine energy contains, anchors, remains. When a man becomes the mountain, the storm within her begins to quiet. That is when her submission is no longer a task. It becomes a release. This form of surrender does not come from force. It is born from emotional imbalance, a concept most men misunderstand. When she feels fully understood, constantly affirmed, and endlessly pursued, she relaxes. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency gives birth to dominance, and dominance suffocates the feminine desire to follow. But when a man leaves gaps in attention, gaps in reaction, gaps in approval, he activates her imagination. She fills those gaps with her own longing, her own effort, her own behavioral shifts. She tries harder. She dresses differently. She softens her voice. She yields, not to please him, but to earn what he never promised. And that is the key. He does not withhold to manipulate. He simply lives by standards. And those standards form a structure that commands respect without ever demanding it. This brings us to the masculine frame, the invisible architecture that separates the man who is respected from the man who is forgotten. The masculine frame is not about posture or performative alpha displays. It is defined by silent boundaries, a man's disciplined stewardship of his time, his energy, and his emotional presence. He does not give away his attention freely. He does not reward disrespect. He does not explain his worth. He lives it. And the more consistent he is within this structure, the more she begins to move within its orbit. Not because she is weak, but because women crave structure. She may rebel, she may test, but not to break him. She tests to feel that he cannot be broken. And once that certainty is established, she softens, she listens, she aligns, she follows, because she trusts the leadership of a man who does not trade his soul for her smile. At her core, she does not want to lead. She does not want a man whose attention is cheap. She does not want a man whose entire world crumbles the moment she is upset. She wants to feel safe in his direction. She wants to feel chosen, but not chased. Desired, but not worshipped. The man who understands this commands her surrender without raising his voice. His power lies in the fact that he has nothing to prove. He knows who he is, and so she begins to shape herself into who she must become in order to stand beside that kind of man. So if you've ever wondered why she ignores the man who tries too hard but yields to the one who barely notices her, it is not cruelty. It is instinct. It is polarity. It is ancient. The man who seems indifferent is not trying to hurt her. He is simply too focused on building his empire, forging his mind, and living his mission. And for that reason, she follows, not out of duty, but from desire. Because deep down, she does not want to be your entire world. She wants to be invited into it. She wants to feel that her place was earned, not given. And that begins the moment she realizes your attention is not handed out. It is earned. A woman does not crave a man who bends to her every mood. She craves a man who stands unmoved in the presence of her emotion. A man whose identity is rooted in purpose, not in her approval. It is not detachment that draws her in. It is the strength behind it. The man who resists the urge to chase becomes the one she pursues, not because he withholds love, but because he embodies discipline, because he lives not to be chosen, but to remain worthy of being followed. This is the paradox of masculine presence. The less he seeks to prove, the more his presence becomes proof. If this message resonated with the part of you that refuses to be ordinary, if you're building a life of discipline, clarity, and inner strength, then subscribe to the channel. Share this with those who walk the same path. And thank you for watching, not just passively, but as a man who is ready to reclaim himself. Stay focused, stay unshaken. Your mission continues.